front. I'm bringing my shotgun with me, I swear to God.
No,
Am I going to let him get away with it? I can't take a chance on getting killed over this, okay?
No.
I'm going to shoot. I'm going to shoot.
Stay inside the house and don't go out there, okay?
We are the Armed Attorneys. Today we're talking about 911 calls, why they are so important in self-defense cases, the kind of simple formula that we have developed based on thousands of incidents we've handled, so it's based on real-world experience, and how this kind of has the best of both worlds, preserving your rights and kind of making interactions with law enforcement go smoothly. But before we begin, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting that like button. And let's talk first. There's a really famous 911 call I want to talk about, the Joe Horn case. You're familiar with that case.
Oh, yeah. Well, not only did it take place here in Texas, in fact, here in the Houston area where we're at, but it has become kind of nationwide one of the most famous 911 calls that's ever been made.
Yeah, so let's listen to a few parts of Joe Horn's 911 call.
I can't see the front. I can go out the front, but if I go out the front, I'm bringing my shotgun with me, I swear to God.
No.
Am I going to let him get away with it? I can't take a chance on getting killed over this, okay?
No.
I'm going to shoot. I'm going to shoot.
Stay inside the house and don't go out there, okay? I know you're pissed off and I know what you're feeling, but it's not worth shooting someone over this, okay?
I don't want to, but I mean, if I go out there, to see what the hell's going on, I mean, what choice am I going to have?
No, I don't want you to go out there. I asked if you could see anything out there. If you could see. Don't go out the door. Mr. Horn? Mr. Horn?
God damn it, they just stole something. I'm going out the window. I'm
Don't
sorry. I ain't
go
going to let them get away with this shit. They stole something. They got a bag of
the
something.
house.
I'm doing it.
Mr. Horn, do not
I'm
go
sorry.
outside the house.
This ain't right, buddy.
You're going to get yourself shot if you go outside that house with a gun.
You want to make a
what
bet?
You think.
I'm
Okay,
gonna
stay
kill
in the
'em.
house.
They're getting away.
That's all right. Property's not worth killing someone over. Okay?
God damn it.
Don't go out the house. Don't be shooting nobody. I know you're pissed and you're frustrated, but don't do it.
They got a bag of loot.
Okay. How big is the bag? They're carrying a
Just
bag
a hand.
of stuff. They're walking out about a hand high.
Yeah,
Yeah. Which way are they going?
I can't. I'm going outside. I'll find out.
No, I don't want you going outside, Mr. Horn.
Well, here it goes, buddy. You hear the shotgun clicking, and I'm going.
Don't go outside. I'm going to get on your regular.
No, you're dead.
All right, so it's safe to say, and we're going to go into, obviously, the formula for a 911 call. Joe Horn violates basically all the rules we've developed.
Yeah, number one, just the length of the call itself. I mean, it's over 8 minutes long.
Yeah, we just played a clip, but the full thing is 8 minutes long, and the operator tells him not to go outside like 14 times.
Yes, and the Joe Horn situation is very interesting, and he did what any normal, rational person, anybody that we would want to be our neighbor would do. He called the police and he said, hey, there's burglars next door. Here's the address. Get over here as soon as possible. Now, that was his first 911 call, and it was very, very good. It was very short, relayed the information, and it did what it was supposed to do.
But it's the second call that's famous. That's the one that you just listened to. And so we see, things deteriorate. Joe kind of inserts himself, maybe unnecessarily putting himself in danger in the process, into a situation where he ends up having to use deadly force. Now, Joe Horn was, I will say, thankfully, the justice system did the correct thing. His case was no billed ultimately. So that means that he was not indicted. He was not prosecuted. It ruined his life. He had to flee the area. And so because of the 911 call, so there's still lots of collateral consequences attached to this 911 call. But we have learned some things that, makes us say, hey, Joe Horn, you probably could have done a better job on your call. It probably could have gone smoother. He might even been able to stay in his own house and not have to flee the jurisdiction because of all this legal fallout. So
the second call that Joe Horn made is the famous one, and he starts off the call because he's already in an extremely agitated state because he's done his duty, he's done his civic duty, he called the police, and the police were just simply not showing up. And being familiar with this area, there are police patrols in this area constantly, so I'm sure he figured, why aren't the police here? And that's what necessitated his second call. So you have a very agitated Joe Horn. He's trying to express his urgency that if the police don't get there soon, the burglars will finish burglarizing, they will escape, and of course nothing will happen to them. And this sort of kicks in his instinct to be more civic responsible and actually interject himself into protecting his neighbor's property. And it's kind of here where things go off the rail, because he goes on and on and on. And the 911 operator keeps him on the phone because that's the way they're trained, correct?
Yes, and it's important to note, the moment that you hit dial, think about, you pull out your phone, you hit the green button, the phone starts ringing, the call is being recorded from that moment forward. So any conversations you're having, potentially even with the perpetrator might be shot on the ground, having a conversation with that person, if the phone's ringing, that's going to be captured by the call. So we see a lot of slip-ups in the Joe Horn case, but I think we got to come back to our core issues of, why 911 calls are so important in self-defense cases, kind of our simple formula that we've developed after lots and lots of cases of this and seeing what works and what doesn't work, and kind of why it has the benefits of being in these two worlds of protecting your rights and appeasing law enforcement. For the most part, we see this actually go over quite smoothly. So the first one, and I think you kind of pointed this out already, why 911 calls are so important in a self-defense case. It's kind of the first piece of evidence we see.
Yeah, it sets the stage. It kind of lays out who the players are. It shows that the individual who's making the 911 call is more likely to be the victim of the crime than the perpetrator. And so it gives 911 an opportunity to say, okay, because the police, whenever they show up, they want to know which one of you called 911.
Yeah. And, when prosecutors are presenting these cases, they like to do it chronologically. What started the chain of events and what was the last thing to happen? Primacy, recency, these are all persuasion techniques that they teach folks in law school. And so that kind of first impression, that's the 911 call. We want to make a good first impression. So let's talk about the formula for a really good 911 call. We break it out into 5 steps that are really easy. And let's go through those. The first one, what is that?
Well, the first one is telling the 911 operator who you are.
Yes.
So you want to identify yourself because there's actually a crime. Some people may not know this, but there's a crime about making false 911 calls, interfering with 911 calls. And so in order to not be accused of fabricating something, you get your identity right out there. Do not be anonymous when you're on the 911 call. Say, I am Edwin Walker, and this is what has happened.
Yeah. Step 2, you're going to give your location. You're summoning help. You got to tell them where they're going. Your adrenaline may be pumping. This might be the worst day of your life, but make sure they know where to send help. The next step is you're going to request specific services, typically police and EMS, because you need help. You were just the victim of a crime. Obviously, you'd want law enforcement to come to your aid, but also EMS, maybe you have yourself checked out. We see people have heart attacks following self-defense incidents. Maybe you sustained an injury that you didn't even notice because your adrenaline was pumping. But also, I will say, in front of juries, it might look like, hey, look, I stopped the threat. I didn't want to have to kill anybody. And maybe if you can save somebody's life, you get to insert that. The next one is what?
The next thing you want to do is tell 911 why you're calling. And you want to always couch this in terms that you are the victim. So you never say, I just shot somebody or I just killed somebody. Since you are portraying yourself as the victim, you will want to say what crime was perpetrated against you that actually caused you to act in self-defense. And so you'll say something like, I was attacked at the gas station, or I was robbed, or somebody tried to rape me, or somebody was stealing my car or breaking into my house. So you get that right out in the open to show that you are in fact the victim and that the other person is definitely the perpetrator of some offense against you or your property or someone else.
Yeah, so that's step 4 is short, truthful statement about the defensive incident and why that's so important. Different than, and this is kind of the industry knowledge, if you would have gone back 10 years ago, they'd always say you're in fear for your life. Well, I will tell you, police, prosecutors, juries, they are all immune to that. The I'm in fear for my life, it doesn't really work anymore. And so by incorporating the facts of the incident and, establishing your defense right then and there, it kind of gets a lot of good things going for you. One, it might establish your self-defense claim. It identifies you as the victim, but also it sounds more credible because you're incorporating the facts of the incident. So I was just pumping gas and I had to defend myself. That sounds a lot better than I was in fear for my life.
Right, and this is kind of a holdover from whenever self-defense laws were written more vaguely, where you would always common wisdom was you were never allowed to use deadly force unless you were presented with deadly force. But as more and more states go to these legal presumptions, then it gives you a whole list of crimes to say that you were in fear of. So you don't have to say, in order to get the legal presumption, you don't have to specifically have to say you were in fear for your life. You can say you were the victim of a robbery, you were a victim of an aggravated robbery, an aggravated kidnapping, a home invasion, a carjacking. And so the fear for your life is kind of implied in that crime that you're talking about.
Yeah, when Emily talks about it, she always likes to use the term, I knew I was going to die. That has the same effect as I was in fear for my life, but I think it sounds way more persuasive.
Well, yeah, and fear for my life has become so commonly used, and of course the people who are against people using their self-defense rights, they tend to mock that sort of thing.
Right.
They tend, sometimes even the police and prosecutors will say, oh, well, that's just what they've been trained to do or taught to do. And
yeah, it sounds pre-rehearsed.
Yeah, they can be very dismissive of that. So you want to be as realistic as possible.
All right, and then the 5, and probably might be the most important step of all this, is hanging up the phone immediately after you've gone through steps 1 through 4, hanging up the phone right away. Stop that call. Don't have an 8-minute call like Joe Horn did. And why is that so important?
Well, the 911 operators are trained to keep you on the phone as long as possible and to keep you talking. Now, I don't know if there's any intentional maliciousness behind that, but obviously the longer your call is, the more evidence you have. The only thing you're required to tell 911, who you are, where you are, what service you need. And then after that, the odds are you're only giving them information that will be detrimental to your case rather than helpful to your case.
Yeah, and no state requires that you stay on the line with 911. They might try to call you back, and I haven't had a client experience this yet, but there's the E911 where I've heard about phones getting locked down. I believe it's real. I've talked to other lawyers who have experienced it. They don't have that technology in my jurisdiction. But, your next call after this should be to your lawyer. So if your phone gets locked down, maybe you're calling from a different phone, maybe you're calling from a landline, just something to think about. Going back to the third key point of, why is this so important for preserving your self-defense rights, and why is this kind of appeases law enforcement? Well, as far as your rights, we don't want to incriminate ourselves. By keeping that call really short, we limit our exposure, we establish our defensive theory, and it really kind of gets the best of this. Maybe you don't even have to testify at trial because you've established your defense. So it preserves your rights in that regard. And when it comes to appeasing law enforcement, why do you think, what are your thoughts on this? Law enforcement, I feel like they get this.
Well, yeah, because they encounter defensive situations every single day in their own practice. If they're attacked or if they roll up on a scene of a crime in progress, so they understand how these things can happen. And the one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to give too much factual information to the 911 operator so that there could possibly be any type of conflict between what has previously been told to the 911 operator and what the police officer observes whenever he rolls up on the situation.
Yeah. But the 911 call is just kind of the first thing that's, starts this Rube Goldberg machine of chain of events following a defensive incident. We have an entire video on the kind of simple techniques and what you should do when police arrive on scene. You can check out that video here. And until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.